everyone for joining. The topic for this office hours today is the Oracle Database Backup Cloud Service update. You see August in the slide because for those of you who attended already, we already did this presentation on August 17th. But we still see a lot of questions that are frequently the same questions coming up. And so, yeah, we thought it was a good idea to do a new run and also give opportunity to ask live questions if there's still some of them around. So let's get started. We will go through a quick overview of the backup and recovery portfolio and what our products are, and then we'll go into more details for specifically on the database backup cloud service and the latest updates, an example on pricing and sizing, some tuning best practices, some information on configuration of all the new features. So in terms of overview of our backup and recovery products and solutions, right? So these are the main pillars, if you want. The Recovery Manager, it's been around for 20 years. You were probably all familiar with it. And then we have the Database Backup Cloud Service, which is an extension or an integration for Recovery Manager to be able to use the cloud storage as a target for ARM backups. And then the Zero Data Loss Appliance, which is an appliance that gives advanced protection, extreme protection, I would say, and features like incremental forever or zero data loss, so continuous protection for the Oracle database. And last one in this picture is Oracle Secure Backup, which is a more traditional, if you want, backup software that can back up not only the Oracle database, but also file system, generic file systems on the most commonly used platform, Linux, Windows, Solaris, HPUX, AIX, etc. And it can use as a target tapes, disk, or cloud storage as well. If you look at more details on how the different things work together. So looking at this example, right, we have here on-premises data that we want to protect, either databases on any platform, any supported database, Oracle database on any platform is supported, and protected files, meaning generic file systems, right? So one first option that's been around for, as I said, 20 years, very long time, is using Armen to back up to local disk. That's a native feature of the Oracle database. Armen is integrated, and it's a recovery backup recovery engine of the Oracle database. You don't need any additional component or anything. You can just use Armen to back up to local disk or to a mounted NFS share. The second option is the recovery appliance. The integrates with Armen as well, so you can again use Armen to direct your backups to an appliance, so no agent is needed on the protected database, and in this way you can achieve, as I mentioned, zero data loss, so continuous protection for your Oracle database, and also incremental forever, so no more full backups on your database, just incrementals forever. So the first backup you do to the recovery appliance is a full backup, and from there on, it's going to be incremental forever, as I said. The database backup cloud service is an extension, so it can be used to back up directly databases just using Armen and direct those backup to the cloud, or it can be used as an extension for the recovery appliance. So you can do your incremental forever to the recovery appliance and periodically move or copy those backups from the recovery appliance to the cloud storage. By cloud storage, I mean generic standard object storage and also archive storage. We'll go into more details on this later and the difference between the two options. Clouded customer similarly can be backed up to the recovery appliance or directly to the database backup cloud service or inside the local object storage that can be purchased with clouded customer solutions. The advantage of this type of approach is that all these backups are in native RMAN format. So once it's, a backup is, for example, moved from or copied from the recovery appliance to the cloud storage, it can be used to instantiate either database cloud service or Nexadata cloud service or, a cloud compute instance where the customer installed their own version of the database with their own customization, whatever. But the point is you don't need anything, any agent, any other software component to restore these backups that are stored in the cloud storage. You only need RMAN, obviously, and the database cloud backup module, which is the SBT library that allow you to access the object storage, and that's it. I mean, that can be directly restored without any particular configuration of other software set. Secure backup, as I mentioned, is a more traditional backup software. It's a centralized solution, so you have your admin server where you manage all your backups, and then you have agents installed on the different clients in this case. So it's not RMAN alone, but it can be used to backup not only Oracle database, but also file system. So you can protect application server or maybe other applications that are not supported and that can, do a local backup to disk, and then you can sweep those files with Oracle Secure Backup. As mentioned, Oracle Secure Backup supports tape, disk targets, and also cloud storage. Okay, so Oracle, both object storage and archive storage can be used as a target for Oracle Secure Backup. The main difference between backing up an Oracle database to the cloud using Oracle Secure Backup or using the database backup cloud service is the fact that the backups stored in the cloud by Oracle Secure Backup are in Oracle Secure Backup format. They are not in native RMAN format. So if you want to restore them, you need to install and configure Oracle Secure Backup, install the Oracle Secure Backup agent on the target client where you want to restore, and at that point you can do that. Now let's go into a little more details. Okay, let me see. I see a couple of questions here. Okay, so method to ask questions. Obviously, you can enter your questions in the chat if you want, and we'll look at them later. But you can also, we will have a short Q&A session at the end. Well, short depends on time, but okay, you will have the option of asking live questions at the end. So let's look in more details in the database backup cloud service and what the updates are. These updates refers to the OCI Classic 18.32 release that was released last July. Okay. So first of all, what the database backup cloud service is, I mentioned it a little bit earlier already, but basically it's a solution that allows you to back up your Oracle databases to the cloud storage. Okay, so you have this advantage of having an offsite storage, which is cost effective. You don't have to worry about scalability. It's virtually unlimited scalability. It comes with encryption and compression, meaning that you can use advanced compression and you have to use encryption because it's mandatory when backing up to Oracle Cloud, even if you don't have the advanced compression option and the advanced security option on your databases. Okay, that usually are required to use encryption and advanced compression. So basically and this is a question that sometimes is asked, right? So why cannot I use just object storage subscription and I need this little additional cost that comes with the Oracle Database Backup Cloud Service, and I need to subscribe to it. And the point is exactly this one. So the database cloud backup module, which is the module that you use to back up to the cloud, is not licensed standalone. You have to subscribe to the database backup cloud service to be allowed to use it. And it also comes with this additional encryption and compression features. Okay? Data is stored in the cloud. And this is standard cloud storage. Three-way protection means that data are stored in 3 different copies. And if you want, you can enable geo-replication, so you can have your data replicated to a remote data center in different geography. Right? So why using cloud storage for backup? Right? I mentioned also that it's virtually unlimited. So it's a perfect match, as I said, for backup application, especially for compliance backups. So backups that must be retained offsite for a very long time. So far, this approach has been addressed often as or using tape vaulting services. So having an external service company that comes in, pick up tape or tapes every day or every week, and takes them to their offsite vault, where they guarantee you that it's super safe, protected from fire, earthquake, whatever, right? And so you can satisfy this type of regulations that many different industries have. So like, retaining 1 copy of your backup for every month for 7 years, 10 years, in an offsite secure storage, etc., etc. So all this can be done simply backing up to a cloud storage, right? And the advantage is that you don't have to worry of all the process of rotating tapes and all this complicated and costly procedures, right? You just back up to the cloud, your backup is secure, it's encrypted, it's offsite, and the storage offsite is managed by Oracle in this case. So it's no worry situation, and it's virtually unlimited, as I mentioned. So in cloud, we have 2 types of storage: standard object storage and archive storage. The standard object storage is for frequently accessed data. So if you do your backup to the cloud as your regular daily backups, and you plan of restoring it with a kind of limited RTO, so you want to be able to access fast access to your data, then object storage is the right solution. You can write objects to object storage, you can read them and restore them immediately at any time. Okay? If you do your backups to the cloud for compliance reasons, long-term retention, backups that you plan you may not need urgently, and with very, very short advance notice, then archive storage may be a better solution, because it's cheaper. It's quite cheaper than standard object storage. I'll have some numbers later. The flip side of this is that you need to wait around 4 hours before you can get your data back for restore. Data, to be able to restore your backups in this case, you have to move back or recall your data from archive storage to object storage, and then you will be able to restore. And this may take up to 4 hours, or around 4 hours. So you have a delay. Okay, so that's the point. It's cheaper, but you may have to wait 4 hours before you can get your data back. If you want to have your data back immediately at any time, then object storage is the right solution. So we have 2 storage tiers, as mentioned. So this standard and object storage. The cost for object storage, this is the object storage infrastructure cost only. Okay, it's around $20 per terabytes per month for standard object storage, and it is I say around because this is a tiered price for classic object storage. So it's not a fixed price per terabyte, but let's say it's around $20 per terabyte per month. Okay, Archive storage is $2.6 per terabyte per month. So you can see there is quite a difference here in the cost. So customers can use different tiers based on their need. Okay? These two different types of storage are not two different services. It's the same storage service or cloud storage service. The difference is made, it's made by the type of container that you use. We have three different types of containers in object storage. Standard container, which obviously is the standard object storage that I mentioned. And then we have tiering containers and archive containers. So archive containers are archive storage containers. Means when you create a container that is an archive container, data that you send to that container go straight to archive storage. And everything you write to that container go to archive storage. And if you want to get them back, you have to record them. And then there is a third type, which is a tiering container. That it's a standard container with a lifecycle policy attached to it, so that you can define a period of time after which you want to move your data from object storage, standard object storage, to archive. And you can also exclude some files that you don't want to be archived. With Database Backup Cloud Service, we support only these first two types of containers. Okay? So either use a standard container or you use a tiering container. Archive containers are not supported. Okay? And we'll have more details on this. The new thing we introduced is a new licensing model, or a new model, if you want, for the Database Backup Cloud Service. Okay? The new model is separating the storage, the infrastructure storage cost and ordering and SKUs, etc., from the actual database backup cloud service. Okay? Until this 1832 release, and it's still the case in or for non-metered SKUs. Okay? You only had one SKU that included everything. So one service that was priced basically at the cost storage plus the additional features that I mentioned, so plus the database backup cloud service actual cost. This is now separated. So we have two new SKUs that has been introduced, one for object storage and one for database backup cloud service archive storage. And these two new SKUs are priced only for the cost of the backup service itself. Okay, so they must go together with the infrastructure. The purpose of this was to start separating this as allowing to choose any infrastructure. By any infrastructure, I mean OCI storage or clouded customer storage. So object storage that comes with the clouded customer solutions. This is the target. We're not there yet. So at the moment, we're still supporting OCI Classic only. But the plan is to have these SKUs available on any infrastructure. So if you want to go to with OCI, you just order this plus OCI storage instead of OCI Classic storage. But we're not there yet. So I'll come more detail with. I'll give you more details about OCI later. For example, okay, if a customer has 1 terabyte of storage used for Armin backups, and it has 300 gigabytes, or consuming 300 gigabytes of object storage and 700 gigabytes in archive storage. At the end of the month, this is the bill or part of the bill that he or she will see, right? So he will be charged for the 300 gigabytes database backup cloud object storage, that is this SKU here, okay? Plus the 300 gigabytes for Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Object Storage Classic. Okay, that will be separate. And similarly, for the archive storage, that will be charged for the 700 gigabytes database backup cloud archive storage plus the 700 gigabytes of Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Archive Storage Classic. Okay? The old SKUs, or the old universal credit SKUs that we had before, are not sorry, let me stop video. Okay. Are not used anymore for new contents. Okay, so all the new ones can be used. As mentioned, the old non-metered SKU, which is a single price for including everything, etc., it's still valid, but that's only supported in object storage. If you want to use archive storage, you have to go with the new universal credit model. Okay, just to clarify the difference between the two. Okay. So in the old model, and again, the model that's still valid for non-metered SKUs, the database backup service was including storage. It means that in this example, if you have a situation where you're using 5 terabytes of object storage for generic data that you copied there using Cloudberry or I don't know, any other application, but pictures, whatever, any kind of data, right? And you're using 5 terabytes of data. And then you're using 10 terabytes of data of object storage for Armen database backup data, right? You will be charged separately. So your 5 terabytes of generic data were charged as infrastructure as a service object storage at this price, okay? And that's it, only 5 terabytes. And the 10 terabytes used for Armen database backup were charged as the database backup service. Again, if you use the old non-metered SKUs, you are still measured against this or using this approach. Okay, so 2 different charges, one for 5 terabytes and one for 10 terabytes. Okay, and this price 10 terabytes included the storage cost plus the database backup service actual costs. Okay, in the new model, in a similar situation, what happens is that you would be charged for 15 terabytes as object storage. We don't care. You are charged for infrastructure object storage for all the capacity you are consuming, regardless of content. Okay, so the total 15 terabytes are calculated for the infrastructure as a service object storage charges. The 10 terabytes of Armen backup data are charged as DB backup service, obviously at a lower price that you were or what you were paying before, because this price is not including storage anymore. So the total would not move particularly, but this gives us the option of having this service running on any infrastructure that you like or you want. We used to have some additional charges, like number of requests, get put, outbound data transfer, specifically for database backup cloud service, and that they're going away. And the only additional charges that matter are those related to the infrastructure as a service object storage. So obviously, you are charged for these infrastructure services as it's normal, as got in their regular pricing. Okay, just to make an example. The amount, I don't go really through a sizing here. I mean, it's kind of simple. It's regular sizing, right? If you have a situation where you are doing or extending or doing regular backups. By regular backups, I mean your traditional or regular backups that you do for your database every day, and you want to send them to the cloud, you have to take into consideration your probably weekly full, daily incrementals, archive logs every day or every hour or every 15 minutes, how frequently you do it, and add them all together for the retention that you need, and that's the total space that you need. Right? You can decide that you may want to keep only certain data in object storage for a period of time. For example, you can decide that you may want to have total 4 weeks retention, but maybe to keep your price lower, you can say, I want to keep only 7 days on object storage. And the additional 3 weeks, that's unlikely I will have to restore them, or less likely. I can move them to archive storage. In that case, I'll wait 4 hours longer to get them back, but you know, you'll have a more advantages press. So this is traditional calculation. I don't go into the details, but there's no difference in doing this to cloud or doing this to a local storage, right? The point is here how to price things, right? So let's assume that after your calculation, you come up with the sizing that says, okay, I need 1 terabyte in object storage and 84 terabytes in archive storage. That's what I need, okay? So you need, obviously, 1 terabyte of database backup cloud service, object storage service, 84 terabytes database backup cloud archive storage service, and then you need the infrastructure service. So the easiest way of sizing and estimating this is using the cost estimator on cloud.oracle.com. Let me quickly switch to this page so you'll see what I'm talking about, okay? So if you go to cloud.oracle.com here, you see you have this different application, infrastructure, etc. Okay? If you go to platform, you'll find the database backup here under data management. You can go to that database backup page where you can see, especially under learn more, you can access white papers, you can access documentation and everything. And then you have this pricing here. Okay? Under pricing here, you have the cost of the object storage and archive storage new SKUs, and you also have the old ones. So this storage capacity is the old one. It's not being used anymore for new contracts, so you can forget about it. Like, as I said, all the additional data transfer and the other things that we used to have, they are not used anymore. The only other thing that remains valid in this page, unfortunately, this cannot go away until we really retire those SKUs. So when we will retire them, officially this will disappear from here, but until then, they have to remain here. But yeah, be aware they're not being used anymore for new contracts. And as we're saying, the other new thing, or the other thing that remains valid in this page, is the non-meter service, which is the traditional one at $33 per terabytes per month, all inclusive. Okay. But remember, this does not support archive storage. This is only object storage. One price for object storage. As I said, these are the prices for database backup, but the cost estimator has not been updated yet. So the easiest way of doing an estimate is to go to the infrastructure as a service storage cost estimator. So if you click here on classic services on the bottom left, okay, you will go to the cloud or to the cloud classic or cloud infrastructure classic page, where you have all those different services, and you can see your storage classic here. So this is what we're looking at. And when you go to the storage classic pricing, okay, you see you have the pricing calculator here. Okay. So you can click on pricing calculator, or cost estimator, yeah. Okay. And then don't go to the cloud infrastructure object storage, because this is OCI object storage, but go to cloud infrastructure object storage classic. Okay, you click add here, and this opens your options down here, where you can enter, okay, the volume of object storage, the amount of object storage you need, the amount of archive storage you need, and all the other additional things like get, put, and I give you more details on this, okay, and the outbound data transfer. And you can enter your values here. This will give you the estimate of the number of these different SKUs you need and the cost. Once you've done that, you just add the same capacity, so the same number of SKUs that you have here on object storage capacity, and you add the database backup cloud object storage SKU, and the same quantity for archive storage of database backup cloud archive storage SKU. That's it. So let me go back to the next slide. I have an example filled in here. Let me make it bigger. Okay. So this is where we were, and in our example, remember, we had 1 terabyte of object storage and 84 terabytes of archive storage. Okay? So we enter our 1024. This is gigabyte. Okay, so this is our 1 terabyte of object storage. This is our 84 terabytes of archive storage. And then we have to make an estimate of this. These are usually very small, so it's not changing that much. But if you want to be, have a complete estimate, then you have to add the number of requests per month in terms of get or put, copy, post, list. Each of this one correspond to 10,000 requests. Each of this one correspond to 1,000 requests. The easiest way to estimate them, okay, is for put, copy, etc. Okay, just estimate the total backup data that you expect to backup every month divided by 100 megabytes. This is because the database backup cloud service divides each backup piece that you are uploading to the cloud in 100 megabytes objects by default. This can be customized, so you can change it, but the default is 100 megabytes. So you will be uploading many objects, okay, as your total backup divided by 100 megabytes, and this can give you an estimate of how many puts you will definitely be using every month. Similarly, for gets, you can do the same calculation for restore. So how do you expect to restore over the month? Divided by 100 megabytes, and this will give you the number of gets. Okay. Once you're done here, you have your numbers, okay, and then you have your total cost. And as I said, just add the same quantity of storage capacity per month for object storage, same quantity added for the database backup cloud object storage, okay? And similarly for archive storage, total quantity, and add the same quantity of database backup cloud archive storage. And that's the total. You add it all together, that's what you get. Okay? So it's kind of straightforward. I hope it's straightforward. But if you have questions, you can ask later. About tuning, the only, or no, not only, but the most important thing about these new changes, because it's not something we had before, the other best practices and the things I'll talk later are no changes since before. But this is new because we didn't support archive storage before, now we do. So how do you create those tiering containers that I mentioned? Remember, we don't support archiving or archive containers. So don't go to the web console to create a container if you want to use archive, because using the web console in object storage, you can only create standard or archive containers. So if it's standard, that's fine. But if you want to use archive storage, don't create that archive container because we don't support it with ARM. Okay. So you have to create a tiering container. Tiering container can be created using REST APIs, or can be created using these new options on the installer module. So when you run the OPC install Java installer, and you specify, as usual, all the other options like the endpoint, username, password, and wallet location, those other things, you can specify, obviously, container name. If you want to create a new container, specify container name and container class. And container class can be the standard or tiering. Okay? If you use tiering, by default, it creates a container, a tiering container that has this policy. Okay? You don't have to worry about this policy. A policy must be in JSON format, but you don't have to worry about it if you're fine with having this 0-day archiving option. Okay? It means that it's a tiering container that will archive immediately all the data that you send to it, excluding XML files. This is something that we need to support the Arman integration. And this is also the reason why standard archive containers are not supported. Sorry, no, I shouldn't have said standard because it may be confusing. But archive containers are not supported. And that's because Arman needs these XML files, manifest file that it creates when backups are sent to the cloud, to be always available immediately for read, not to be recalled when they are needed. So Arman expects this to be always accessible at any time. And so we don't want to archive these XML files. And again, this is the reason why we only support tiering container, and we need to have this exclusion in place. Okay. If you go to an archive container, it would archive everything, including these XML files. So Arman would not be happy about that. I was saying this is a default policy. Archive after days 0. Okay. Means archive immediately. You can, if you don't want to use the installer, or if you want to use a different option here, like the example I made before, where you said, I want the data to remain in object storage for 7 days, because if I have to restore them, more likely I will restore, or I will have to restore the last version. So I want it to be quickly available, and I won't wait for hours. And then after that, okay with moving them to archive. Then you should use curl, for example. That's one option you can use. You just use curl. Using this example, we are creating a container, a tiering container with this policy. Just use time 7 here instead of 0. Okay. And that's all you need. Again, the exclusion must remain as this. But you can use time 7 here, so you create a tiering container that will keep your data in object storage for 7 days, and then it will move it to archive storage. And then you just specify tiering here, but as a container already existing, it will take it, that's fine. So it's how it works. The other thing I want to note is that not all data centers, unfortunately, support archive after values greater than 0. There are 2 data centers only that support this in the US, one in Ashburn, one in Chicago. And it's only the new data centers. So if it's a new account, should be good since new accounts are created in the new data center. But if it's a legacy account, you may be stuck with this limitation of only using 0 archive after policy. You would just see it, because if you try it, you will get an error that says you can only use 0 as a value for if you are in one of those data centers. You can only use 0 as a value for archive after. If that's the case, it means that either you stick with that, or you have to move your container to a different data center, one of the new ones that supports it. Just a quick overview or review of common questions that we have. One of the most frequent is, how can I manage backups if I don't have Arman access, or I'm not sure if what Arman reports is what is actually in the cloud storage, or I think my cloud storage is storing a lot more data. It's a lot bigger than what I would expect, and what I would see, or what I see when Arman lists backups. And so there is this, and you can get it from this Moss node. There is a Perl script that you can use to browse an object storage without Arman, so you can run it on any Linux or Unix machine where you have access to the cloud storage. It just browses the object storage and provides you a list like this, where it gives you the container name, database name, DB ID, the file name, which is basically the backup piece, file size, when it was modified, what type of file, it's a data file, backup, archive, log, control file, etc. And okay, some additional information, encrypted. I expect this to always be true because it's mandatory. But you can see, okay, if you have compression on, if it's an incremental or not. This can be used to make sure what's stored in the database, what's stored in the cloud, is actually what you expect to be there. But it can also be used to delete backup. So it also has a delete option that may be helpful. Especially if you delete or drop database without deleting your backups in the cloud first, and if you don't need them anymore, obviously, because at that point you don't have Arman anymore. You cannot use Arman to delete those backups anymore. And deleting all those files, if you remember this, it's not a single file. Each of these correspond to a number of objects actually in the cloud, each of one with this 100 megabytes size. So deleting them and finding them manually would be really, really time consuming and complicated. So you can just run this tool specifying the database name, the BID, whatever options you want, and then you add mode delete, and it will delete all the backups from there. So that's something to keep in mind. Other question about network throughput. Well, there are a couple of mods nodes that can be used, and there are a couple of options, and I have listed them here for testing your throughput. Obviously, network throughput is crucial. Okay? So it's, in the end, it's the main limitation factor if you want to send your backups directly to the cloud. Okay? Because if you have 100 terabytes or several hundred terabytes database and you want to back up to the cloud, every time you have to do a full backup, you have to consider how long it's going to take, what bandwidth do you have, and again, there is no magic science here. You can use any available online bandwidth calculator and see how long it's going to take to transfer data over the network, and see, and if that does not match, the time does not match your backup window, the only option you have is increasing your bandwidth, right? You can use fast connect. You can have up a number of fast connections to the Oracle Cloud, but something that you have to be planning in advance. If you just want to use the internet, beware of the bandwidth you have available. Okay. So the other thing you can do that may help is look at the compression you're using. Okay. Sometimes, even after you have found that you have the bandwidth, or you expect to have the bandwidth, you may not be using it completely. And so there are a couple of things that you should look at. Basically, the first thing to check are number of channels you're using and the compression level you're using. Okay. Well, let me get to this. Oops, sorry. Let me get to this later. The point is, okay, and especially when talking about cloud storage, where you pay based on the capacity you are consuming, you may be tempted to use high compression, right? Because high compression will reduce your space, and so reduce your bill, your cloud bill, because you consume less space in the cloud. And you may think that as you're reducing your data, it's going to be faster to transfer them over the network, but that's not always the case. With high compression, I would say it's never the case. And the reason is high compression is a very CPU intensive process. So it reduces your data a lot, but it places a big load on the CPU of your server, so that it may slow down your backup. Even if you have bandwidth available, you're not using, because it takes longer to compress your data than to transfer them. So what we see is that usually you get the best performance using low or medium compression. And again, remember to have the right amount of channels or parallel channels running at the same time. There is no rule here, no generic rule that you can use. The level of compression depends on that you can get, depends on the type of data that are stored in the database. So there is no generic rule that you can use, and the only way of finding out the best compromise is just to do some tests. And here's an example that this is a real POC case that we have with a customer. And what they did, they chose the database, which was around 1 terabyte in size, and they said, okay, let's try doing low compression backup with 8 channel, and let's see how it's going to take. And this took 40 minutes, right? And then they increased the number of channels, and they saw nothing was changing. So, and then they moved to a medium compression, again with 8 channels. See, the time increased, but the size went significantly down. Okay, so it went up to 3 hours, but the size went down to 180 gigabytes. And then they went to 12 channels, and as you can see, with the low compression, it didn't make any difference. With medium compression, the time went down to 1.5 hours. Okay? They went to 20 channels at this point because they said, oh, maybe we had more channels, we can go even faster. It went worse. So it was 2 hours and 20 minutes with 20 channels. And they tried high compression. And as I mentioned, you have that space reduction, but look at the time, it went up to 9 hours. 12 channels, 9 hours and 10 minutes, 20 channels, 9 hours and 30 minutes. So in this case, they settled with this medium compression, 12 channels, an hour and a half. Okay? It's not the fastest option. 40 minutes would have been better if time or the backup window was all they were looking at. But they were good with the backup taking an hour and a half, they were fine. And this was also reducing the space consumption in the cloud, so allowed them to have a lower bill. Okay? So this is the type of thing. Again, I wish there was a single rule when you can plug in some number and get, oh, this is what you have to do. Fortunately, there's not. So going through such a kind of test is the best approach. So you'll find out, you'll figure out what the best solution is. About OCI, so I spoke about this earlier. So the database backup cloud module, as I said, is not licensed as a standalone product. So its license to use is bound to a subscription to the database backup cloud service. Okay? If you don't have a subscription to the database backup cloud service, you should be in violation of the licensing rules if you use the database backup cloud module, unfortunately. Also, the database backup cloud module mandates the use of encryption. Compression is optional, but it's also a feature that you can use for free if you subscribe to the database backup cloud service. So even if you don't, the advanced security option and the advanced compression option on each of the databases that you are backing up to the cloud, you are still allowed to use them when backing up using the database backup cloud service. Okay? The new SKUs, as I mentioned, cannot be used at the moment on OCI. For now, it's only OCI Classic. Similarly for the non-metered SKU, okay? This old SKU where you basically subscribe to the service, you decide the amount of storage that you want to use. It costs $33 per terabytes per month, and you're going to pay for it every month, no matter if you use the storage or not. Okay. So this is one option if you want today to be in a legal position from a licensing perspective, and you want to use OCI, which is if you want to use or you expect to use 5 terabytes of object storage, you can use this subscribe to this SKU. You're going to pay 5 terabytes per month, even if you don't use them. If you want your backup, this will entitle you to use the backup module, encryption and compression. If you want your backup to go to OCI, then subscribe to OCI object storage, send your backup to OCI, and you're in a safe position. Okay. I understand this is a little bit complicated as an approach. You would need 2 different the domains. It's kind of not a simple approach. I understand that, but unfortunately, until we support the new SKUs with OCI, I don't have other options to use. We're working on that, so stay tuned. I don't have a time yet, but I hope we will be able to make an announcement soon on having the service available, or at least a time on when it will be available in OCI. The other thing I want to mention is, even if you go with this approach, remember OCI archive storage is not supported. So you can only use object storage in OCI if you decide to use this kind of workaround approach. Okay. Again, same part of the announcement that I hope we'll be able to make soon. We will also announce when OCI archive storage will be supported. Okay. So I see the chat blinking here, so I assume there are some questions in the chat, and I go through them now. If you have other questions, obviously, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask them. Okay, so let me see what question we have here. So go scroll back here. Oh, I see somewhere already response by team. Thank you. So I'm not going through them again. Okay, will the console be extended to create tiering containers? That I don't know. That's something that the cloud storage team manages. I don't know why they did add it there. So I don't have an answer. I can try to find it out. Maybe send an answer later. If customer run Oracle DB on compute. Oh, okay, so if they're running Oracle DB, they can take the backup in the same way. The point is that if they're running the database on compute, I assume they're not using the tooling. It means that they will have to use exactly the same approach or the same procedure they would use if they're backing up an on-premise database. They can download the database cloud backup module from OTN, install it on the compute instance where they have their Oracle database, and configure it using their credentials and storage endpoint, container name, etc. And that's it, no difference. Okay? Yeah, one thing that it's good to point out I didn't mention. So yeah, thanks Tim for remembering this. If the customers are using the database cloud service or Exadata cloud service in OCI, today they will be doing backup to OCI storage, and there is no license for that. Everything is integrated in the solution, and for now they will only be charged for the object storage. Okay. Obviously, the approach I mentioned about subscribing to the database cloud service, etc., works for a customer that has full control of their backups, etc. In case of using XSCS or DBCS, everything is integrated in the tool, in the console, etc. So it's a little bit more complicated. So they will do backups. So the tooling will do backups to a specific tenant in the cloud, not to the customer tenant, a different one, and everything will be controlled by the XRCS or DBCS service tenant. So it will be done behind the scenes if you want. Yeah, follow up on the compute node that says compute on OCI. Well, it's the same thing again. You can download the module, install the module, and configure it in a compute instance in OCI. At that point, you can either use the Swift compatible endpoints in OCI, backing up to OCI, but remember you end up in this situation that I hope will be able to clear soon, or you can back up to OCI Classic Object Storage, but at that point you would be going to a different data center. You would end up being charged for egress or outbound traffic from OCI to OCI Classic. So I don't know if that's an approach that you want to take. I don't have other questions here in the chat, so yeah, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask if anyone wants to ask anything. Okay. All right. So I think there are no other questions. I hope it was all clear. If you have follow-up questions, obviously you can reach out to us. And oh, let me see something else coming up. How to get the presentation? Yeah, this presentation and the recording will be shared soon, so you will have both the slides and the recording. If all do the data center support tiering, yes, all the data centers support tiering. Limitation that I mentioned, the legacy data centers only support a zero archive after policy. So you would be archiving everything immediately. The new data center or data centers, they support archive after with a different greater than zero value. So you can do those things of saying keep data in object storage for a certain amount of days and then move them to archive storage. And that's only supported on the new data centers. Yeah, as I was saying, this will be shared. Thank you for joining. I hope it was all clear. Otherwise, reach out to us either directly or using the AskTOM website. And yeah, I'm going to close this for now. Thank you very much. And stay tuned for the updates on OCI. Thank you very much.